Welcome to Tucker Carlson. Accomplish what reasoned argument could never accomplish. They commit moral blackmail. Typically, their aim is gun control. A crazy person committed an evil act, therefore you must be disarmed. But this time, that's not their goal. This time, their goal is more comprehensive than that. They want to take charge of what you are allowed to say and think. How are they trying to do that? By blaming you and your opinions for the crime. Watch.
This man the flames of his hatred were fanned by a president who kept talking about this caravan of refugees as if they were terrorists or as if they were coming to commit atrocious crimes in our country, which they're not.
So did you catch the message there? It wasn't subtle. The murderer was angry about illegal immigration. If you oppose illegal immigration, you are very much like the murderer. Even if you've never killed anyone, your views have inspired others to kill. You are implicated in this atrocity. You are a monster, just like the lunatic in Pittsburgh. You must change your beliefs, otherwise you will be punished. This is how free speech dies, and free thought along with it. The range of acceptable opinion narrows until it mimics a CNN script. Before long, everyone is nodding piously along in unison. There is no disagreement. There is only conformity. Obedient serfs chirping the party line. That's the goal. After a century of defending free speech, the left is now its enemy. Just last week, the Southern Poverty Law Center issued a list of demands for tech companies. Anyone who disagrees with the SPLC, they explained, must be prevented from operating a website or raising money online or organizing events or publicly expressing their opinions. That's an order, says the SPLC. Well, it goes without saying that the Southern Poverty Law Center has no moral standing to make any of those demands. None of the people making demands do. And yet, as always, the least virtuous are invariably the most self-righteous. Watch former DNC Chairman Howard Dean explain that American politics is no longer really about politics, which is to say about competing ideas of what might work and what doesn't work. Instead, politics is a spiritual battle between light and dark, between God and Satan himself. Watch.
It's now become a struggle about good versus evil, and the President of the United States is evil.
Evil. Now, that is not the language of American civic life. It never has been. That is the language of holy war. Evil. Well, evil people can't be reasoned with. They shouldn't be listened to. They must be crushed and destroyed. Did Howard Dean really mean that? Well, we're going to assume, for the sake of this country, that he did not mean that, and none of the other people talking like Howard Dean right now mean it either. We're hoping all of them have lost their senses temporarily, and at some point they're going to wake up feeling chastened and ashamed and ready to rejoin the adult conversation in progress. That's our hope. Either way, we do not plan to stop talking, no matter what they say, no matter what they demand. Every American has an absolute right to express his views, regardless of what Twitter thinks. It's our birthright. It's the most important freedom we have. We're not giving it up on this show. On our set, you are always free to say what you believe, even if we disagree with you. Free expression does not cause extremism. It solves extremism. Victor Davis Hanson is a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, and he joins us tonight. Professor Hanson, I wanted to talk to you first tonight because I think you have perspective that is lacking in this conversation. Are we overstating it? Do you think that speech is at stake in our current debate?
No, I think it is in a way. I think all of us, though, want a safe space, if I could use that left-wing term, where we don't want to turn on the television for NBA, NFL, or Grammys, or Tonys, or White House course and be lectured at. And we don't want to spend Thanksgiving as if it's 1861. So we want it to tone down, but we don't know what the rules are, Tucker, because we sort of established that James Hodgkinson, to take one example, did not shoot Steve Scalise because of what Biden and Maxine Waters or Madonna said on Inauguration Day. He was just nuts, and that might have, he had other, criteria, but it wasn't just what the opponents of Donald Trump or the conservatives said. Okay, we accept that. And then all of a sudden, with these latest two incidents with the pipe bomber, Mr. Sayak, and with the synagogue shootings, we're told that it's somehow Donald Trump, but it's not. We don't know anything about the cause and effect. We don't know whether he was too pro-Israel and therefore he brought people out of the woodwork and they're angry with him, or that he was too anti-Israel and he empowered the alt-right. They can't even get it straight. So we don't get, the American people think, well, wait a minute, I don't like hate speech or tough speech, but I don't know what the rules are. They're not, it's not symmetrical. It looks like it's a left-wing electronic, reign of terror. These self-appointed Facebook Robespierre in a nanosecond can guillotine you. And people don't like that. So we're saying, what are the rules of speech? And from what you and I and others have seen of Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, the masters of the universe in Silicon lack either the intellect or the morality to tell us what is permissible speech. So we don't know who to turn to, this confusion. So maybe we just go back to the Sermon on the Mount and say to ourselves, let's treat people the way we would like to treat them. I would tell that to Hillary Clinton. Maybe when Mitt Romney lost in 2012, he didn't say, I'm not going to be civil until the next election. Or when George Bush quite graciously accepted that he was out of office in 2009, he didn't go around the country, as Obama is now, calling the President of the United States an inveterate liar. So I think it's asymmetrical, and people understand that until the adjudicators know. They can't adjudicate us because they don't have the moral high ground.
Well, they definitely don't have the moral authority to decide who speaks. But I wonder if their assumption is right. So what they're saying is that certain ideas are so bad that they cause violence.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it's even possible for any society to ever squelch ideas. Doesn't that cause, and I'm not just saying this is a left-right phenomenon, it's just a human phenomenon, when you try and prevent people from having unapproved thoughts, don't you create extremism?
Yeah, I think that's an age-old dilemma that goes back to the Greeks, and we in the West have decided that we don't want the medicine to be worse than the disease of censorship and setting up a censor board that tells us who can say what. So we err on the side of free speech, and it's especially pertinent when the people who are wanting to censor free speech right now don't want to do it symmetrically. They feel that because they're more noble, or that Donald Trump is some type of ogre, that they have deserved, because of their noble ends, any means necessary to further their moral project. And I think that's got people very, very angry and sort of alienated.
Well, I mean, anytime you have what is in effect a religious conversation, a theological conversation that begins with, I'm a good person and you're not, how can you hope to make progress? How can you solve anything if one side believes itself to be saved and the other damned?
Yeah, you can't, and you have to be empirical, so you have to say this particular act in this particular person's mind occurred because he heard this particular person say something, or a climate. Nobody's been able to make that cause and effect, and in the absence of that, as I said, in a nanosecond, all these half-educated people get on at some of the clips you pay, and then they say, I accuse you of all this. And everybody's afraid. I mean, you and I are one, and you especially are 1 nanosecond away, one slipped word from being your head electronically chopped off.
Yep.
And that's what we don't want.
Every day I think that, but I think it's important, more important than it's ever been, to tell the truth and be honest. Thank you, Professor. It's great to see you.
Well, you have to speak up against it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's important.
Thank you.
Robert Woodson is the president and the founder of the Woodson Center. He's the author of The Triumphs of Joseph, and he joins us tonight. Thank you very much for coming on, Mr. Woodson. You're one of the people we go to at a time like this. The obvious question is, what do we do? I don't think either side wants to see the level of political intensity and rage that we're seeing right now. What's the answer?
We've been here before, during the 60s, during my era, when 4 little girls were blown to death, blew up in the church, and Emmett Till was killed.
Yes.
And we had the bombings of Dr. King's house, almost killing his wife and his child. Even in the presence of that, what stimulated solutions were the civil rights movement engaged in debate within itself. The movement, there was a lot of debate as to what is the way forward, and it caused a fracturing in that movement, but the fracturing caused SNCC and other organizations, but each one developed an agenda to change it. We did not demonize a political party. We didn't look for villains and victims. We came together around solutions, and that is but it was backed by a spirited debate. Debate is missing now. The issues today is the loneliness, the feeling of the lack of content and meaning in people's lives are leading to suicide, in record number, violence, isolation. And right now, for anyone to speak up to address that problem, they're being vilified. because you either have to declare yourself as being on one side of it or the other. But the answer, though, is to give the people suffering the problem their own voice. Right now, people on the political left and right, the extremes, presume to speak for whites on the right, and others who presume to speak for minorities on the right, on the left. I believe that whites in trailer parks have more in common with black and browns who are in these toxic communities. In my organization, the Woodson Center, we have 3,000 of these groups who come together and meet, and racial antagonism is never an issue. The problem is that the groups that we represent, they are not given a voice. The others, they're represented by people who really don't represent their real interest.
Yes.
And these are intellectuals, elites, who are getting to denigrating the values of this country, and those values of our founders may be used as political tools by both the left and the right. But for grassroots leaders who are struggling with drug addiction, loneliness, those principles and virtues are life-enforcing. They are the ones, these values are the foundation upon which transformation and redemption.
Right.
So what we need is to give the people who are experiencing the problem their own voice. There's no place in this country where a low-income white, black, Hispanic can come together and say to the country, these extremes do not speak for us.
Right.
The Woodson Center is trying to promote that kind of...
And the people who claim to be our leaders weren't elected by us, and
No.
they're not our leaders.
And our civil rights movement has morphed into a race grievance industry, and it's lost its moral authority.
I wonder, since you were there for the civil rights movement, right in the middle of it, the last time this country felt like it was coming apart, as it does now, I wonder if that could have been peacefully resolved if social media had existed then.
That's a good question, but I really think that the commitment of people there, this was a movement of inclusion, not exclusion.
Right.
We believed that we were holding America to live up to its promise. Right now, people are denigrating those values and saying to blacks, because of the legacy of slavery and discrimination, that America is to be ever condemned. And we reject that notion. The very fact that blacks fought in every war in this country and not one is ever convicted of treason.
Yes.
Because we believed. I was coming through the airport last summer, and I saw 90 veterans being wheeled in to come to a ceremony here, and I just wept.
Yes.
Because I thought about the sacrifice that they have made. Blacks and low-income blacks and whites in these low-income, working-class neighborhoods are America's patriots.
That's right.
They are the ones who should be given a voice to speak for themselves and not let these extremes speak for them.
I agree with that completely. Robert Woodson, thank you, as always.
Thank you,
for the
Tucker.
perspective. I appreciate it. We should add that free speech is discussed at great length in a new book called Ship of Fools. You can order it now. It's online. Meanwhile, it was driven off the front page for a couple of days, but the migrant caravan is a real thing, despite what they may be telling you on television. There are actual people in it, and it raises actual questions that, as a citizen, you have a right to debate openly. And we're going to do that after the break.
National Guard,
But
it
they're not
had no
me.
effect.
They're not me. This is I'm sending up the military. This is the military. And they're standing there. And one thing that will happen.
No lethal force,
when they're
though.
captured, we don't let them out. What has been happening, and we're not as of pretty recently, we're not letting them out. What happens is they would catch and release. We're catching.
This year, trying to sign up non-citizens to vote. Officially
Of Real Clear Politics saying that recently that the House is a toss-up right now, too close to call. So I think that's good for Republicans. But when you look at the numbers, Democrats just need to pick up 23 seats in the House to take it back. There are 24 districts that are currently in Republicans' hands that Hillary Clinton won in 2016. And there are enough seats that either lean Democrat or likely Democrat or toss-up races for Democrats to get to that number of 23. So the path is certainly possible. It is plausible for Democrats to take back the House. But I think the fact right now that it is not a foregone conclusion bodes well for Republicans.
structurally, it's tough, as we said from the beginning. There's been an awful lot of retirements, most of them Republican. It's hard. The Senate, where's that as of tonight?
Well, I think the Senate, look, right now it looks like Republicans are certainly going to keep the Senate. I think they might even pick up seats. You look at North Dakota, Kevin Cramer has just taken the lead and ran with it. He's been up by double digits in that race against Heidi Heitkamp, so North Dakota is probably definitely going to go Republican. I also think Missouri and Indiana look like potential pickup opportunities for Republicans. You want to talk about the Kavanaugh effect? That is real in the state of Missouri. Josh Hawley, his first campaign ad that he ran was about the Supreme Court. He ran another ad after the confirmation hearings about the circus and attacking Claire McCaskill for her vote being against the president as well. So I think that plays out there. And you look at places like Arizona and Nevada where Democrats are hoping for pickup opportunities. Those races have been in the margin of error, but Heller has been up in some of these polls. So I actually think Republicans will retain Arizona and Nevada. That would be a huge win. But I don't want to embarrass myself.
Okay, we're saving the tape. Lisa Booth, thank you for the update.
Thank you, Tucker.
Well, thanks to the tech industry, children today, your children probably, are being exposed to tablets and smartphones before they're even potty trained. Is it good for them? Well, the people who make the technology know it's terrible for them. And that's why they protect their own children from the products they make. We've got details on that next. Screens. Not only are children addicted to smartphones, but the schools, public schools especially, are filled with laptops, tablets, and online homework. Why? Because Silicon Valley pushed that on our schools. They're profiting from it. You know what they don't want? That garbage in their own kids' schools. According to the New York Times, tech elites are keeping screens out of their children's schools and teaching them to play with real toys instead of digital ones. Why? Because they know screens are poison. They should know they make them. Tom Kirsting is a licensed psychotherapist, author of the book Disconnected, How to Reconnect Our Digitally Distracted Kids. Tom, I know that you remember very well, and maybe some of our viewers will too, it was only 5 or 6 years ago that all the dumb people, the fad adherents, were telling us the most important thing we could do was to put iPads in every school in America and our kids would magically get brilliant. This was a lie pushed by Apple, and they all believed it. What do we now know about that?
We now know that that is absolutely false. Something I've been lecturing about for 10 years. I've been going out there, stomping the ground, trying to get parents to really see what's happening, what this stuff is doing to kids' brains, how that is affecting their kids' emotions, why we have so much anxiety and depression, why the suicide rate is through the roof. And now you have the tech execs in Silicon Valley that are actually preventing their own children from using these devices. And when I saw that piece, I was thrilled to hear that, because maybe now, we can educate other parents that aren't as aware as these Silicon Valley tech execs are.
But, I mean, Philip Morris executives never gave Marlboros to their own kids. So I guess this shouldn't surprise us. What surprises me is that none of the people selling this garbage to our children, marketing it to them, pushing it on them through their schools where they have to obey, are ever held accountable for what they've done. Why is that?
It's unbelievable. It's got to be. Must have something to do with behind-the-scenes lobbying and special interests and things of that nature. Now, these tech execs, if you read some articles on it, there's a large amount of students that go to the Waldorf schools out in Silicon Valley, and those schools do not allow any form of electronic devices. It's all paper and pen learning. And I think in one of them, 70% of the students in one of those schools are the sons and daughters of Silicon Valley tech execs. So they know things that the average parent out there doesn't know, and I'm glad we're having this discussion right now.
But they sell the products anyway.
They sell them anyway.
Don't alert the rest of us. And school district after bovine school district continues to believe that technology is the key to education, and they never warn anybody about the threat that they clearly perceive.
Right, and I work at a school during the day for 22 years in addition to being a psychotherapist. And the biggest thing that we're trying to get a handle on is the mental and emotional well-being of our children. So 23 years ago, it was really more about education. You'd have a school counselor that would help kids with their schedules. Now it's part mental health and part education under the public school umbrella.
How many, since this is your world, how many educators do you run into who really understand the magnitude of the imminence of this threat to kids from technology?
The educators that I run into, that I speak with, they know it anecdotally because they see it, firsthand in front of them every day. But what they need to do is read more. Like my book really underscores everything with statistics to back it. We need to get parents out there hearing experts like myself discuss the ramifications, not just mental health, but also the family system. You know, when you look at families nowadays, it's sort of, I liken it like this. An average family of 4 is really more like 4 individuals living a solitary life under the same roof staring at a screen. Exactly.
But by the way, people can't read anymore because their brains have been trained to read 50 words at a time by the iPhone. Their brains have been destroyed. All of ours have been. We're going to look back on this moment and say, I can't believe we were so passive in the face of something that was killing us.
You better believe
Tom, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tucker.
Well, Hillary Clinton just made an awkward, racially tinged joke. Should we give her the benefit of the doubt? Does anybody get the benefit of the doubt anymore, ever? Mark Stein joins us next to discuss. Of people in American media, Kara Swisher, at a Q&A in New York last Friday. Watch this. Clinton makes a small, racially tinged joke, for real.
What do you think of Cory Booker's, and you didn't comment on him, and you feel free?
Oh, I adore him.
What do you think about him saying kicked him in the shins, essentially? Start to get to that kind of political.
Well, that was Eric Holder.
Yeah, Eric Holder,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know they all look alike.
Well, we disagree with Hillary on just about everything, obviously, but in this case, we're willing to give her the benefit of the doubt. She seemed like she was just making a joke. We don't assume that she's exposing some kind of latent racism. We're not here to publicly shame her, not over that anyway. Lots of other things you could shame her over. The question is, though, would Hillary and any of the people who support Hillary extend that same benefit of the doubt, that same courtesy to you? Author and columnist Mark Stein has some ideas on that question, and he joins us tonight. Mark, do you think if you said something like that, Hillary Clinton would say, you know, Mark Stein, like, I don't know his heart. You know, I'm willing to judge him on the case he makes. I'm going to let, you know, he's probably just kidding. Do you think she'd say that?
No, and she wouldn't say it about if you had made that remark either. Nevertheless, I'm inclined to agree with you that there are 40,000 reasons to hound Hillary Clinton out of public life.
Yeah.
But this isn't one of them. And I go back to what Victor Davis Hanson said at the top of the show when he used that line, the cure is worse than the disease. The cure is worse than the disease, Head. A society that destroys people over one remark like this is actually a very ugly and evil society, whatever wrongs it might think it's trying to right. Hillary here, by the way, I'll say something else too. Hillary is not the most sophisticated kind of communicator.
No.
Here, she is someone who can tell Cory Booker from Eric Holder. One's got a mustache, one has no hair. It's not difficult. So she's not actually using the line that all black people look alike to her. She's actually ironically teasing about an old cliche that she is not using for real. And actually, that kind of ironic sense has all but been obliterated from public life now, where if you say something that is sly and ironic like that, you're assumed to mean it for real, and you have to be hounded from public life.
And what I guess gets me is, look, as someone who said a lot of dumb things, and I'm sure will in the future, I hope that I always have a chance to explain what I meant. And it seems that nobody has the right to have an apology taken seriously or an explanation considered seriously. It's, we caught you, it's over. I don't know who makes these rules.
Well, one of the consequences of that is that everybody then winds up going around tiptoeing on eggshells, and you can never tiptoe enough. Steve Martin made a lasagna joke. He tweets 1,000 times, and he thinks, oh, this tweet's a bit edgy, this one's a bit provocative. He had no idea the lasagna joke was going to have people urging him on Twitter to just go and kill himself, or to finish him, or to obliterate his career. And we can't have that. At a certain point, we have to let Hillary survive her, you know, or they all look alike joke, because the price of living in a world where one little remark absolutely destroys you, that is, the cure is worse than the disease.
I know. And I wonder if all these people encouraging the mob on these cable channels ever think about the country they're creating. All right, take a look very quickly at this horrifying image. This is CNN's Lester Holt, of course, of NBC, dressed up as Susan Boyle, the singer. He has changed his appearance in a way that is now very controversial. He wore that costume for a Halloween episode of the Today Show. Megyn Kelly, of course, was just fired for suggesting that it wasn't always bad to dress up as a member of an opposite race. Look, I want to be clear. I'm not drawing, I don't think there's an equivalence between the two. There's a long history of one and not of the other. But I also wonder, I don't think there are like 5 people in America who'd be deeply offended by what Lester Holt did. I'm not offended by it. Maybe, though, if you dress like that, you should be slightly less self-righteous in the face of other people's transgressions. I guess that's the point I would make.
I think there's an element of Susan Boyle-phobia in that white face, which is offensive to, Northern English women of a certain age. But the fact is, again, it's not about anything real. There is no, the minstrel tradition, the blackface tradition in America is dead as a doornail. Bing Crosby, 1942, he wore blackface for an Abraham Lincoln number in Holiday Inn. 10 years later, when he made the film White Christmas, he did a minstrel number in whiteface. Somewhere between 1942 and 1952, an entire tradition no longer became respectable. And again, the cure is worse than the disease.
Yeah.
I was down in Australia when I believe a Kanye West fan, she went to a party. He was her favorite celebrity, so she went to a party dressed as Kanye West. She's a nobody. She's 19, 22 years old. She's at the start of her life, and the entire Australian media wanted to destroy her. This is actually evil. I would like Lester Holt to do the news as Susan Boyle for a week. We should all get over this stuff.
I know. Let people apologize. If there's no forgiveness, then you can't have a functioning society. Mark, thank you very much,
No, that's
as always.
right. That's true. Thanks a lot, Tucker.
Well, one of the Mueller investigation's top cooperating witnesses now says he doesn't want to cooperate. He says he was framed. He'd like to get out of the plea deal he made with the government. George Papadopoulos is that man, and he joins us next.
The death penalty in the case. President Trump and the First Lady will visit Pittsburgh tomorrow to comfort the victims, to express their condolences and unite the country. While the Dems, the rhinos, the national left-wing media try to blame the president for all acts of political violence.
I think this president's whole modus operandi is to divide us. He gets up in the morning with new and inventive ways to divide us.
You've talked about inclusive politics, which tries to unify. Does President Trump practice those kind of politics?
Sometimes he does, and sometimes he doesn't.
The president's obviously a racist. He's obviously a demagogue.
New Jersey congressional candidate Jay Weber has been targeted for his political views. He joins us tonight to talk about it. Also tonight, the Pentagon deploys more than 5,000 troops to the southern border, while the president considers new executive actions to stop the migrant caravans moving north toward our borders. 2 other caravans are gathering right now in Central America. President Trump vowing this weekend to do whatever it takes to secure our border.
Republicans want strong borders, no crime, and no caravans, right? We don't want caravans. We're not having caravans.
No caravans. We'll take up the president's powers to stop an illegal immigrant invasion with Fox legal analyst Greg Jarrett and former federal prosecutor Sidney Powell. And with the midterms now only 8 days away, President Trump continues his tireless campaign in support of Republican candidates, planning 11 more rallies before Election Day. Republican strategist Ed Rollins, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist Michael Goodwin, with me tonight on the latest on how the Trump effect is boosting Republican candidates in the midterms. Our top story: a deadly shooting over the weekend at a synagogue in Pittsburgh, leaving 11 people dead. Today, the suspect appeared in court, where federal prosecutors vowed to seek the death penalty. President Trump immediately condemned those attacks, and he called for unity. The president and the First Lady scheduled to visit the synagogue tomorrow. Fox News correspondent Garrett Tenney joins us live now from Pittsburgh with the latest.
Well, Lou, federal prosecutors have already started the process to seek the death penalty against the man responsible for this horrific attack. 46-year-old Robert Bowers didn't have much to say this afternoon as U.S. Marshals rolled him into court in a wheelchair for his initial appearance, which came just a few hours after his release from the hospital for the gunshot wounds he received during shootouts with police on Saturday. A federal magistrate read the 29 federal charges he's facing for killing 11 people and injuring 6 others at the Tree of Life Sanctuary. Investigators say the gunman walked in Saturday just as Shabbat services were getting underway and moved throughout the synagogue, shooting and killing as he went, using an AR-15 rifle and 3 Glock handguns. The victims were all Jewish. And according to the FBI, the gunman repeatedly expressed his desire to kill all Jews. Many of the survivors say it is a miracle they are still alive and say that is largely thanks to the quick response of police, including the 4 officers who were injured in those confrontations.
7-1, contact, shots fired, Give me additional resources, third floor. Come on, we got a guy barricaded actively shooting at...
We are awaiting the first court appearance.
We got 1 operator shot at this time. Third floor, contained in 1 room. 1 operator down.
Barricaded myself into the bathroom, and 911 just kept me through it and just said, stay there. The police will come and get you at some point.
You can see here at the Tree of Life Synagogue an example of the outpouring of love and support we've seen over the last few days. There's been almost a constant stream of people, thousands who have brought flowers and cards. Many have come to pray, sing, or cry. All of them to express their solidarity with the Jewish community. Tomorrow, the first funeral will be held for a pair of brothers, Cecil and David Rosenthal. They lived with developmental disabilities. Friends say they were inseparable, the kindest people you would ever meet, and never missed a Saturday of worship. And theirs is just one of the many stories of faith that will be remembered here in this community for many years to come. Lou?
Garrett, thank you very much. Garrett Tenney from Pittsburgh. The man suspected of sending suspicious packages to prominent Democrats appeared in a federal courtroom today in Miami. Prosecutors requested Cesar Sayak be held without bond until his trial. He will be returning to court Friday for a hearing on whether he should be transferred to New York to be prosecuted in New York. Sayak's appearance comes as another suspected package was intercepted today on its way to CNN's Atlanta offices. Joining us tonight, Republican candidate for New Jersey's 11th congressional district, Assemblyman Jay Weber. Weber has been endorsed by President Trump, and just days ago, Assemblyman Weber received a violent threat directed at his 7 children. Thanks for being with us, Assemblyman. And Jay, let me just start with this kind of violence and threats of violence. This is unprecedented. Your thoughts first about the threat to your family and what is going on here?
Well, thanks for having me, Lou. Yeah, it seems like in many ways the fabric of our country is coming apart, and my heart goes out to the victims in Pittsburgh, a city that's mourning. It's really a nation that's mourning. We had an incident that on a much smaller, much different scale in my campaign where some creep sent an anonymous letter suggesting harm to my kids. My wife and I took care to contact police, secure the kids, make them feel safe, and then determine that we weren't going to be bullied, that we're just not going to let violence and threats of violence ruin democracy, trample our First Amendment rights. We're going to keep fighting and push back. It's the only way to deal with bullies is to punch them back in the nose, so that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, bullies. It is, and I think you use the word creep. We're watching event after event, incident after incident in this country that appear to be driven by individuals who are either emotionally disturbed or mentally ill. Your thoughts on a society right now that seems to be doing very little to identify those people before they can act or act out, and to give them care and treatment. Your thoughts?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And we just saw in New Jersey, actually, a New Jersey mom helped stop a shooting in Kentucky just last week because she was vigilant about what she saw on Facebook, was threatened by someone on Facebook, reached out to authorities in Kentucky, and the authorities in Kentucky think they they frustrated a school shooting because someone was vigilant and spoke out. And so I think as Americans, as members of a community, we have to realize that we have to look out for one another. And when you see something disturbing, when you hear something disturbing, you got to make sure you say something because these days you don't know what's going to happen next. And we just don't want the next Bowers or Sayoc to, ruin someone else's life. So we got to look out for each other.
Wise words. Jay Weber, thanks for being with us. We appreciate it so much. Up next, President Trump keeping his promise, sending more than 5,000 troops to the border. We take up the president's authorities to address the immigration crisis, the border security crisis. Fox legal analyst Greg Jarrett joins us. And President Trump immediately denounced the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting that left 11 people dead. But many at CNN are blaming the president for the tragedy.
He does have to take some responsibility for the type of racist bioclimate that we find ourselves in.
I think there has been a radicalization of the White House, which has been going on for a number of years, and you're now seeing some of the consequences of it.
Division is what has brought him to this point politically.
His business model is divide and conquer.
This kind of anti-Semitism and anti-immigrant fervor, which I do think the president is absolutely culpable of.
How do you marry this situation where the president last week says he's a nationalist? All he had to do is say white nationalist to that.
My God. More on the national left-wing media's irresponsible and vicious claims when we come back. Stay and medical help and making their way to our southern border. The leading group of migrants is in Niltepec tonight, traveling 60 miles over the weekend. In addition to the leading group, there are now as many as 4 other caravans on their way to the United States. One right now in Honduras, one in El Salvador, another in Guatemala City, and one on the Guatemala-Mexico border. Now, on that border, migrants clashed with federal police from both Guatemala and Mexico. One migrant lost his life in the confrontation. This coming as the Pentagon today announced it's sending 5,200 U.S. military troops to the border. There, they will be offering support to the Border Patrol and to other U.S. military forces. And if there were ever any question as to why our military was desperately needed at that border, look no further than this previously deported man who explained why he wanted back into the United States.
Are you willing to break the law to get back to the United States?
Yo quiero entrar y pedir un perdón.
He says he wants to apply for pardon for the felony he committed.
Can you ask him exactly what happened?
¿Cuál es tu felonía exactamente?
Number 3.
A third-degree felony?
Intento de matar.
Attempt of murder.
And he wants a pardon. Joining me now to talk about the president's legal authority to protect our southern border, Greg Jarrett, Fox legal analyst and author of the New York Times bestseller, The Russia Hoax. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Lou.
A stunning moment there.
Sure.
With a migrant who wanted back in to get a pardon from the president of the United States for a felony 3, a murder.
Yeah. Well, this is the problem. I mean, you're talking about thousands and thousands of people. We don't know who they are individually. Many may have criminal records, as this gentleman does. Some may be armed with weapons. You know, we just don't know. And because of the mass of people, we don't have the ability to properly detain and screen them for the alleged asylum claims. Now, to the journalists who scream, oh, it's a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act, the media is ignorant and obtuse. It is not a violation of the act.
Wait. Let's be very specific. The national left-wing media.
Yes.
Is, what were the words? Obtuse?
Ignorant and obtuse.
Okay. I want to get them in the right.
They don't understand the law.
Let's just make sure we've got that out there.
You know, the act envisions, it prohibits the military from engaging in domestic law enforcement functions. That's not what this is. Look at the mass of people here. This is a threatened invading force that may well bash its way through our fence the way they did the Guatemalan fence.
And I want to point out, these are the calmest pictures of that confrontation that has been on our air all day. I mean, these police have been pushed around.
Right.
They had to fire tear gas in their own defense and to try to control a crowd that was on the verge of riot.
That's
throwing some of the biggest rocks I've ever seen being hurled in a demonstration, a riot, whatever you want to call that.
We've got 2,100 National Guard. They're certainly entitled to be there. Border